Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Ayers. Welcome to Tuesday Talks DC, brought to you by the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village, Cleveland Park Main Street, Woodley Park Main Street, and the DC Public Library. You can join in tonight's conversation at any time by posting your comments and questions online using the chat function on your screen. At the end of tonight's presentation, Pat Whitty from the Village will moderate a Q&A session with our speaker. By the way, this talk is being recorded. If you know of people who could not be with us tonight at 7 o'clock and hear this live, I'll be sending out a link to a recording on the Cleveland Park listserv. There'll be one in the Village newsletter, and you can tell your friends to look there and they can watch it later. Well, you're in for a real treat tonight because we have Pulitzer Prize winning political cartoonist Matt Wuerker with us. And his topic is, if you're not confused, you're not paying attention. Cartooning in our upside down times. Matt lives in Woodley Park, and he was original on the staff of Politico. He's still at Politico as staff cartoonist and illustrator. He's been awarded the National Press Foundation's Berryman Prize, the Herbach Prize, and in 2012, the Pulitzer. Prior to joining Politico, Matt had a successful freelance career as a cartoonist, illustrator, and animator. And over the last 40 years, his cartoons have appeared in dozens of newspapers and magazines. Matt is the former president of the Association of American Editorial Cartoonists and serves on the board of the Herbach Foundation. He's also president of the board for Cartoonist Rights Network International. And by the way, Matt designed that wonderful poster for tonight's event. Matt, it's such a pleasure and honor to welcome you to Tuesday Talks.
Thank you, Linda. I hope everybody can hear me okay. It's a pleasure to join you via Zoom tonight. I'm going to go a little off script. I normally, when I give talks like this, give a general talk about how awesome political cartooning is and our great legacy going back to Thomas Nast and Herbach and all that sort of stuff. But instead of giving my normal talk, I thought that given the fact that these are not normal times, I want to give you a slightly abnormal talk. I want to talk about these very confusing times, in particular, a syndrome that I suffer from, which is commonly known as Trump derangement syndrome, which afflicts cartoonists in particular, but there are many variants of this syndrome. Cartoonists, the common usage is that it's people who can't see the forest for the trees or anything past Donald Trump. It's only Donald Trump. And I would like to argue that as somebody who is afflicted with this syndrome, that if you are not afflicted with this syndrome, there's something wrong with you. It's a strange syndrome, like I started to say. It has many different variants. Cartoonists probably have the most virulent strain, but then there's other strains like it affects politicians. It's even affecting institutions. There are people in the Republican Party that I would say are afflicted with a very strong form of Trump derangement syndrome. So instead of talking about cartooning in general and different topics, tonight's focus is on Donald Trump, who is he's a historic, unique, singular figure in American politics, perhaps the biggest lying, deceitful, misogynistic, reckless, shameless, malignant growth on the American body politic ever. So did I say that my political opinions are mine alone and don't represent those of Politico as an organization or as a company or anybody on the staff necessarily? I do come from a long tradition of political cartoonists who were basically hired to stir things up and offer our opinions in hopefully colorful, entertaining form. And that's my job at Politico. But again, I want to emphasize that I am speaking as somebody with strong opinions and Trump derangement syndrome. And so please don't hold this to Politico. But I want to just sort of go back and offer you the cartoon record of the last 7 years. which have been really hard. I'm only 29 years old, and 7 years ago when Donald Trump first showed up, I had a dark beard and no wrinkles. And see, TDS the ravages of TDS are quite terrible. So to save you from looking at my mug, I am now going to share my screen and we will go to cartoons. And we can go down through the history here. Hopefully you're seeing the cartoons now. And we'll go full screen. So first, a bit about my past. I've been drawing a lot of presidents. I go back, I lied about my age. I know it's shocking, but I go back to, I first started drawing cartoons when I was in college and Jimmy Carter was president, and then cut my professional teeth with Ronald Reagan, then George Bush Sr., Bill Clinton, and of course, George W. Bush, and then moving up to Obama. I'm not really partisan, even though you may sort of think that, especially tonight, since I'm going to be primarily beating up on Trump. But there are a lot of Republicans that are embarrassed and really worried about what Trump is doing to the country. So it's really not I don't see it as a partisan issue. And I do cartoons across sort of the political spectrum. The Clintons were a lot of fun, of course. Biden, there's plenty of opportunity for humor with that. But that's not what I want to talk about tonight. I want to talk about this singular creature that has occupied the American political system and is not going away. So some of us were, like a lot of people, when Trump first started like entertaining the idea of running, everybody in the political commentariat was thinking, oh, this is going to be a lark. This will be fun. There's nothing that political cartoonists and people in the opinion world love more than a great political circus act. And, of course, Trump was going to bring us that. And so in the beginning when he finally jumped in those first two cartoons were actually back in 2011 and 2012. And he didn't run back then. But then in 2016, he decided to run for real. And things got wild really quickly right out of the box. And we suddenly realized that we were dealing with a unique character, somebody who did not play by the rules. And at first, again, it was wild and entertaining. And I had a cartoonist friend of mine criticize my co-opting Maurice Sendak like this because he thought it trivialized Trump. And I argued with him for years. And I think in the end, Steve Sack was right in that maybe I shouldn't have been trivializing. But it was entertaining. Everything about Trump was like unusual and colorful. And even his hair, which was God's gift to cartoonists, was just unlike anything cartoonists had, as Trump likes to say, no one's ever seen anything like it before. And so this is an early cartoon, sort of in the lighter years, the early phase of Donald Trump, making fun of his hair. But then he started to do other things that, again, there's the long political tradition of the political dog whistle. But Trump was a virtuoso when it came to the dog whistle. And this is an attempt to sort of emphasize that. He had the dog whistle and he had Twitter. And he also was completely willing to say anything about anybody. So, from Gold Star families to attacking the media to dismantling his political opponents in the primary with just schoolyard taunts. It was unbelievable. He even at one point in the 2016 campaign went after the Pope. I could stop and read some of these. Maybe I will on the ones that have smaller captions, but you get the general idea. And suddenly this new creature in the political landscape started just marching toward victory, and the Republican establishment freaked out. They thought it was going to be Marco, or they thought it was going to be Jeb. And it became clear that the wild tactics were actually working. And this is a cartoon I did in the run up to the convention. And it was there was suddenly a movement to draft Paul Ryan to save us from Trump. The Republican establishment was basically trying to stop the hostile takeover of the party. And one of the big keys in this was the evangelical movement that just for some reason had was just wedded to Trump. Trump was their man from the beginning. I mean, a guy who doesn't go to church. I know this is all stuff that everybody probably knows, but a guy who probably has committed at least 5 or 6 of the 7 deadly sins. And yet the evangelicals fell in behind him and wanted a fighter. So this is one of my favorite cartoons from the last 7 years. This one I drew in Cleveland at the convention where the Republican establishment basically was swallowed by Trump. And I like this because one of the things that I strive for in political cartoons is something that's really visual humor, color. The fewer the words in the cartoon, the better, because I think it communicates something faster with more of a punch. And in case you're looking at this on your phone or something, the gardeners got birtherism and vitriol and all this sort of stuff that the Republican Party had unleashed on Obama over 8 years had fed this thing that culminated in Trump and the hostile takeover of the party. And then during the general election in 2016, there was a tightrope. I mean, there was just scandals that would pop up, the Access Hollywood tape, and he would, instead of backing down, Trump was just shameless, and he would just come at people over and over, and a lot of us kept thinking he's going to just explode at some point here, but he didn't. And Hillary Clinton got in all sorts of trouble for her comment about the baskets of deplorables, which in hindsight, considering things like the January 6th coup attempt and things like that, she wasn't that far off. I mean, she wasn't calling the whole Republican Party or conservative movement deplorables. She was saying that Trump was speaking through his dog whistle and Twitter to a faction of the party that was undeniably pretty deplorable. But the Republican establishment wasn't able to beat it back. And this is an old cartoon trope going back to the famous Escher Prince, and referencing the Eagles song, Hotel California. And also it's appropriate, of course, to Donald Trump, a man with hotels. So at the end of the general election, everybody was stunned. All the polls showed that Hillary was going to win, and I don't think Trump himself, has been reported in many books, expected or ever intended to win. It was sort of to feed his ego and boost his brand. And then everybody woke up the day after Election Day in disbelief, including people who maybe regretted not voting. So I did not draw this. This is a Photoshop job I did with a Hieronymus Bosch painting. But there was that week, many of us remember that life was feeling very much like a Bosch painting. And then Trump goes to work and immediately starts the Muslim travel ban and pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and things like that. And this is right after Charlottesville that I drew this. Suddenly we had things like Charlottesville, the alt-right congregating and pretty much being clear that they're in league with some pretty rough nativist groups, and they're going to work. And I actually have great pride in this particular motif. I stole this from the Flintstones. I look for very classy metaphors. But this is the water buffalo, Lodge of the Water Buffalo from the Flintstones with Jeff Sessions. And if you think about it, this is kind of what that QAnon shaman wore to the January 6th insurrection. And I don't know whether or not I want to take credit for the fact that maybe he stole this fashion advice from me or not, but I think he did. One of the other unique things about Donald Trump was his use of Twitter. And I was imagining there are a number of cartoons here where we'll invoke the ghost of Nixon. And just imagine if Nixon had had the ability to use a social media platform like Twitter to throw sand in everybody's eyes, especially the umpire's eyes or whatever, and confuse people the way Trump has managed to do it up until getting banned from Twitter. Going back to an old trope and mixing my Flintstones thing, of course, the number one thing on the agenda besides the Supreme Court was a tax cut. So something that we had some experience with before. And so Paul Ryan he's such an interesting character. I mean, he's very emblematic, I think, of a whole lot of the old Republican Party that's now been shunted aside. And you know, there was it's really fascinating to me, the Trump derangement syndrome when it comes to the leadership of the Republican Party. I mean, when you think about people like Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio or Mitch McConnell, people who Trump has belittled, he's insulted their wives, and still they kowtow to the guy. And there was a moment after the Access Hollywood tapes where, you know, there are a lot of people who were going to stand up to Trump over his behavior, and they all backed down. Steve Bannon calls that the sort of pivotal moment where they sorted out the men from the boys who were going to put up with this stuff. And they did. And Ryan, I don't know if it's to his credit or whatever, decided that he was not going to stick around for this. So he did not run for re-election. And the caption here, if you can't read it, is, well, I guess my work as a cultural conservative and a fiscal hawk is all done. And then, of course, there were the other scandals that started to roll. With the very beginning of his presidency, the Steele dossier being released, the Mueller investigation into Russian collusion in the 26 campaign. And if you were a faithful watcher of cable news, you were really getting your hopes up that this was going to be a short-term thing, and that Trump was going to go for a very big fall, a huge fall. But then, you know, we had very high hopes for Mueller, and the investigation was very methodical and slow, and then ran into the likes of Bill Barr, who again threw more sand in people's eyes to confuse people. And then, of course, there was sort of, Trump is just, he's the master of obstruction and diverting people's attention, or just insulting people right and left. And then so by the time the Mueller report finally comes out, it was very careful. It did not exonerate Trump. A bunch of people were arrested and indicted for conspiring with the Russian government, but Trump moved on. And I don't know how many people remember when Mueller was forced to testify. It was just kind of heartbreaking. It was just a guy who clearly wasn't up to the job of dealing with somebody like Trump and his minions. And so the show goes on, and the wild rumpus continues. And Mueller heads out of town. I mean, you know, some people think that political cartooning is like hard, and it's so easy. We have in the world of cartooning, we are probably the most spoiled in that we have other people writing our material for us all the time. I mean, I'm always amazed at the people who have a comic strip with like a dog or a cat, and every day they have to figure out what the little dog does. And for me, I just have to open the newspaper or go on Twitter or something, and you know, the shithole countries thing that Trump said was so emblematic of him just not being normal. And back to his sort of hostile takeover of the Republican Party, there were lots of enablers in this. Mitch McConnell being the number one and keeping everybody in line, and everybody in the Republican Party laser focused on judicial appointments. So they were very good at keeping the herd in line. I see 2 chats, but I'm going to ignore those and keep going. We're going to have questions at the end, so save your questions or your comments, and we'll entertain those at the end. So the midterms surprised people, and there were a couple of races in Virginia in particular that surprised people, and it seemed like maybe the Trump agenda was going to be slowed down somewhat. It's interesting when you're doing cartoons and you're trying to use metaphors from popular culture. It kind of depends on people recognizing what the metaphor is. So this is from that Mad Max Fury Road movie. A lot of people didn't see it. It's sort of, as I get older, it's more problematic. Like if I quote a Bob Dylan song, everybody over the age of maybe 55 or 60 gets my clever allusion to a Bob Dylan song, and then the majority of people have no idea why I would be drawing or saying something like that. So it's just one of the hazards of cartooning, I guess. Some cartoons are just sort of trying to capture something, a dynamic, in this case, with Speaker McCarthy. Again, somebody whose fealty to Trump is quite unshakable, clearly. Oh, we did this one already, double slide. One of the other things that's just astounding to me about Trump and the Trump organization, really the Trump family, is it's all about the money. I mean, just this week, the thing about that they were overcharging the Secret Service who were protecting him and his family when they stayed at his properties. They were really good at this at the get-go, and every scandal seems to be an opportunity for them to do even more fundraising. So you know, this sort of getting the people in the country who are uncomfortable with progressive politics or something worked up, and they're going to fight back against the woke people, and somehow it's always money going into the pockets of the Trumps. So you know, the Trump derangement syndrome is a terrible thing. It's really hard to even go on vacation from it. He's omnipresent, and the scandals, or there's always a new twist or turn that you're following. It could be the FBI raiding Mar-a-Lago. It's impossible to keep up. So one of the obvious things that our system supposedly has to prevent a maniac from wrecking the country is impeachment. And there was a period of time there, people sort of forget, where there was a lot of hesitancy on this part of the Democratic leadership to pull the impeachment lever and go after Trump. So this is a cartoon about what exactly will it take? Where does the Trump train have to take us before we're ready to try impeachment? And again, the fundraising just continues, and the made up fantasies about Mexico's going to pay for a wall on the border, and that he's got a great replacement for Obamacare that he's going to unveil just as soon as they dot the I's and cross the T's. And people continue to sort of lap it up. There started to be a churn in the White House, though, that was kind of unmistakable. And one of the things that seemed to be happening was that lots of people would go into the White House, some for very brief tenures like Scaramucci, and others for longer tenures, but it would basically wreck many otherwise sterling reputations. So this is an homage to Rube Goldberg. And number one is take a job working for Donald J. Trump. Number two is dive into a caustic snake pit of avarice and chaos. Step four, going up the little drawing line, get hung out to dry and slapped around for missteps. I skipped wrong order. Number four, pledge fealty to Trump. 5, get branded with a rude nickname. 6, any remaining integrity that gets pulverized. 7, finally, the coup de grace, you get fired on Twitter. and this was a pattern, and people in the White House were I think, always operating with a great deal of fear that they were going to end up on the wrong side of the big guy. And even the Stormy Daniels thing that went on for forever didn't seem to be enough to shake the evangelical support for the guy. And I guess I should have put a church in this one. It's always interesting to go back and look at cartoons and sort of reconsider things you could have done differently. But sorry for putting that image in your head in the tidy whities. But Trump seemed to be the master of beating back things. The first impeachment was a failure. The Mueller report was basically sidelined and forgotten. And they soldiered on and continued to stay in power and continued to make money. And meanwhile, on a sort of very unfunny note, the country just got more and more polarized. And ironically, the wall that he promised to build along the border was something that I feel he managed to build between Americans. And over the last 7 years, I don't know about you all, but families that get together for Thanksgiving, a lot of them don't, because of the red-blue divide. And I think a lot of this is because of the example that Trump as an individual set for everybody. I'm jumping around a little bit here. This was with the impeachment. Of course, the analogies to the Nixon years were an obvious thing to jump on. And this is Haldeman and Ehrlichman, Liddy, Spiro Agnew, John Mitchell or whatever, the ghosts in the tidal basin, perhaps being on the conscience of Trump and his cohorts. But and here's another one with a Nixon angle. The print's sort of small, so the first frame is, so we pilfered our opponent's documents, and yeah, we had covert slush funds and an enemies list, of course, and we had no choice but to smear the press and conspire in a huge cover-up. But if the president does it, it's not a crime, right? So Roy Cohn is recognized by a lot of people as an early mentor for Trump. And there is really a connection between him and Nixon. But in so many ways, Trump really put Nixon to shame. You gave into the subpoenas, handed over grand jury transcripts and the tapes, and then resigned in disgrace. I'm so much better at this than you, loser. And he is. I mean, it's really kind of phenomenal when you sort of think that Nixon left town in shame, avoiding impeachment because he resigned. And Trump is not capable of shame. So it doesn't work with him. And so this is another circus metaphor. You know how Republicans are so concerned about declining testosterone. This is like a big thing in certain Republican circles. They seem very concerned about manhood and stuff, but there are very few of them that seem willing to take on Trump. And then, of course, we have to touch on the pandemic and the crazy mishandling by the administration. I mean, one would hope that a modern, developed, educated country that's faced with a giant epidemic would actually come together and dispose of culture warfare and actually, in the interest of preserving each other's lives and our family members' lives, that we would dispense with the politics. But we went the other direction, and Trump politicized the heck out of it and ignored the advice that he was getting from doctors, and fed the fake news stories and the fake remedies because he had a gut. And the Trump gut was something that we all had to sort of listen to. Back to, I really feel sorry for Marie Sendak. I apologize, Mr. Sendak, for doing this with your wild things. But the press conferences in the first year of the pandemic were just kooky. And remember the thing about lights and bleach and all that kind of stuff. But again, I mean, you'd think that maybe in the middle of that, there would have been another attempted impeachment. I mean, as hundreds of thousands of people are dying, but people put up with it. And the norm sort of has shifted, I think, in a very dangerous way. I mean, he's really changed the sort of behavior that's tolerated by an American president. And even when people try to push back, where there was that moment where Nancy Pelosi referred to him as obese, and everybody got all upset, like, how dare she use such language? And it's just silly. I mean, every political cartoonist has to do the Titanic metaphor at least once a year. And so this is my application of it to Trump sailing on and on through the various allegations and scandals. And the unsinkable Trump just goes on and on. So this is, now we're getting close to election 2020. And the Democrats, in some kind of disarray, not really clear who the Dragon Slayer was going to be. Definitely everybody realized that we needed to find St. George. And some people thought it might be St. Elizabeth or St. Bernie. And then the surprising thing, I mean, if you look at this cartoon, I totally missed Joe Biden here, like a lot of political pundits. But Trump lost. And he lost big in the Electoral College and also in the popular vote. So this was the cartoon I did after Election Day. And after 4 years of it all being about me, we could all breathe a sigh of relief, and maybe we could get back to us for a change. Again, just nice, simple, not lots of words. These are the cartoons I'm proudest of. But then after that, January 6th, and it was just, you know, I still get shocked when I see, like, during the committee hearings where they play the footage of the violence that day. And it's truly shocking that the peaceful transfer of power that has always occurred in the United States through thick and thin, through civil wars and world wars, almost didn't happen. They almost pulled off a coup, or at least jammed up the works so that maybe he would have declared martial law or whatever. There's still lots of stuff coming out on that and in various books. But coming back to our theme for the evening of Trump derangement syndrome, if you're not shocked by that stuff, you're not paying attention. And the investigations continue. Another good cartoon trope, of course, Moby Dick. This is Letitia James from New York, who's taking one more whack at the great orange whale that has, I think that's Mueller attached to the whale there, as it's already sunk the ship, but maybe one more harpoon will do it. So when I posted this, I posted almost all my cartoons on Twitter and Facebook, and somebody rightfully pointed out that this is not exactly accurate to Moby Dick, and so I took another try here with switching the role where Trump is Ahab, which probably fits even better, and the fact that the crew is unwilling to have a mutiny or abandon ship or whatever. And then now we're getting to more recent history. The January 6th committee, I think, did a pretty able job under the circumstances. But as Steve Bannon likes to say, if the news is bad, you just flood the zone with shit. And the MAGA media, if you have a crazy Uncle Buck who is very devoted to Donald Trump and suffers from that variant of Trump derangement syndrome, he's probably hasn't seen a lick of the January 6th hearings, and probably won't ever. And then I don't know if Trump's coming back and he's going to run again. A lot of people, a lot of very smart people think he's definitely coming back. But even if he doesn't, his legacy is alive and well, and spawning other crazy people who subscribe to a lot of the crazy stuff. And again, like all good scandals or whatever, every time Trump embarrasses himself, or after January 6th, he went out and he raised $250 million in the Stop the Steal Fund. It just continues. The family gets richer and they have more and more sway and power over the Republican Party. And he just refuses to live by sort of either norms or laws. The fight in Mar-a-Lago over him taking classified documents continued. So it's not just executive privilege. He's claiming super duper rich white executive guy privilege. And while I'm ragging on Trump, I have to also just say, the thing I don't understand is if he's sort of the champion of the outraged, downtrodden American working class, why does he live in a golden palace that would embarrass Saddam Hussein? I mean, I don't get it. Like I said, I'm confused. So here's the 6 stages of grief after losing an election. Number 1, falsely claim the election was stolen and use the big lie to raise money. I won. Number 2, keep lying and pressure people to change the vote tally. Number 3, keep lying and raise money. Number 3, keep lying and try to seat your own electors and raise money. 4, keep lying and mount a violent coup to stop the peaceful transfer of power and raise money. Keep lying and keep raising money. Number 6, ignore overwhelming evidence that it's a big lie. I need more money, and keep raising money. So this is a cartoon from just a week or so ago. At this point, it seemed to me that it's like we have a name for a flock of chickens, a herd of cows, and a murder of crows, and it's time that we refer to a grift of Trumps. And here we're heading into the midterm elections. And, it seems like in the polls just today, we're showing that the main concern is the economy and inflation. But the minions of Trump are out there. The idea that there's a large people that still deny the legitimacy of the 2020 election, and more Republican candidates are also saying that if they lose in the midterms, they will not concede because elections are not reliable. So we are at a perilous point. I think maybe we need to think about things that are a little bit bigger than gas prices. And COVID has taught us a few different lessons. And one is what doesn't kill you mutates and tries again. So looking ahead to 2024, I think that we need to shore up as much as we can of our institutional strength to protect our basic little democracy. Nonetheless, the Trump's derangement syndrome will go on and on and on because his ego must be fed. So I had all these slides and I thought it was going to take longer than this, but we went through them pretty fast. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and we can go to questions or comments. Hi, Pat, are you there?
Okay, I'm supposed to start my video.
There you
go. I'm here. Thank you, Matt. Those are extraordinary cartoons. And I know that the audience has watched all of them, probably wishes we could have stared at each one of them a little bit longer, but that's all right.
Fast. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. We appreciate the time. Which of the You've spoken a lot about Trump, but which president have you found is easiest to draw, and which have you found to be the most difficult to draw?
I have to say that my favorite one to draw was Ronald Reagan, partly because I was young then and just starting out, but also he had fabulous wrinkles and whatnot. So and as a crosshatcher, I could get in there and render and render and render. But Trump is in sort of a category of his own, in that you might have noticed in some of the cartoons, all you had to do is put the hair on something and everybody would recognize that plant or that fish or whatever it was as Donald Trump. And I don't think we've had any presidents that have given us that little sort of prop.
Well, that's certainly true. And I'm going to get back a little bit to you in a minute, but who made up the term Trump derangement syndrome?
You know, I should have looked that up. I could have Googled that. Now you're making me feel bad. I didn't do my research on the where it started. It's used by the right wing. I mean, you know, when I post stuff on social media, I have certain detractors, trolls who like to sort of go, there you go again, you know, TDS and that sort of stuff. So it was a disparaging label that came from somebody on the right wing, like, what's the matter with you guys? You know, you're obsessed with him or whatever.
See, that's interesting. I would never have guessed that. How did you pick up cartooning? Did you take art in college? How did you get into this?
I did not take art in college. My parents steered me away from that because they knew I was going to basically doodle and cartoon my way through college. I have a degree in international affairs from Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. And I really got into it because I like to draw, and I was fascinated by politics, and the intersection between art and politics really you find right at political cartooning. And then on top of that, I was fortunate as a kid, I got to know Paul Conrad, who was the legendary cartoonist at the LA Times in the 1960s and 70s. And it just so happened that my mother was in the League of Women Voters with Paul's wife, Kay. And so when I was in high school, Kay, my mom gave Kay some of my drawings and gave them to Paul, and I got to go visit him at the LA Times. And Paul's advice at the time was, you can clearly draw, but you'd better figure out what the heck you want to say, because you're just you're an ignorant little teenager. So go study something serious and keep drawing. And he was a great mentor and became a very good friend, and encouraged me all along the way. It's a very, I mean, if you think about it, it's a very unusual career path. The idea that you can draw cartoons that are basically little scribbled opinions and the world cares and somebody will actually pay you money for it.
So were you some kind of a cut up in high school or college, or?
No, I'm actually, I'm kind of an introvert. The nice thing about political cartooning is it's not the same as, say, stand-up comedy or something like that. It's a somewhat solitary profession where you draw on your own and you submit your cartoons and stuff, and that suited me just fine.
Who are your favorite political cartoonists? Who are the best, or who are your favorite other political cartoonists?
There are a whole bunch, and we're a small tribe. Some would say a shrinking tribe, and many of us are really close friends. I just came back from the Association of Editorial Cartoonists meeting in Columbus, Ohio, and we get together and kvetch and argue about politics and whatnot. And I don't know, Cal, who draws for The Economist, is a good friend and an absolutely brilliant cartoonist. Ann Telness, who does fabulous work for the Washington Post. I'm a big fan of Tom Tolles and was sorry to see Tom hang up his pen. But I mean, Trump in some ways has really sort of burnt out cartoonists. I mean, it's been such a crazy 7 years. One metaphor, cartoonists are always trying to find the right metaphor, that I use when people talk about, has it been hard? It's like, it's been the opposite. It's, like when you go camping in the mountains and they say, please don't feed the bears and be careful with your garbage because the bears are going to come down and eat the garbage and get fat and lazy. And since 2016, the cartoonists have been basically getting fat and lazy and eating the garbage. And then if Trump ever leaves the scene, we're going to have to go back to drawing about more difficult topics, and that we won't have nearly as much material to work with. But I do think that it's been the best of times and the worst of times for cartoonists in many ways.
You know, it's interesting. One of the questions we have here is, how do you separate your personal point of view from the point of view of perhaps your employer or whatever? But even more than that, or maybe as a related question, it's a two-part question. Are there political cartoonists across the political spectrum?
Oh yeah. No, there definitely are. And I'm not supposed to be fair and balanced. That would be like asking, any other opinion journalist to be fair and balanced, like George Will, why aren't you writing liberal opinion pieces or something? We all have our opinions, and we are encouraged to express them as strongly as possible. I'm very fortunate in that at Politico, I'm completely off the leash. I was there at the very beginning when we were just 40 people, 16 years ago, starting out. And it's always been like, I'm responsible for my opinions and nobody else weighs in on it. So if I step in it and I outrage some people, then they just direct them toward me, as it should be. To answer the question about conservative cartoonists, yeah, there's definitely conservative cartoonists that range from Michael Ramirez, who's probably the most prominent right-wing cartoonist, and then there's crazy QAnon cartoonists who post on Facebook and social media. Ben Garrison, if you want to look him up and find out what the QAnon people are laughing at. I have this kind of fun thing I get to do at Politico, where every week on Friday we post a cartoon carousel, which is a collection of about 15 or 16 cartoons from around the country and from around sort of the political spectrum. And it's basically, I do believe firmly that it's healthy to hear different voices in commentary sections. And a lot of people read magazines that are strictly left or strictly right wing. And with the cartoon carousel, what we try to do is we sort of say, hey, this is what the conservatives are saying about the events of the week, and this is what the liberals are saying. And you get a nice range of both humor and points of view and whatnot. But I also, as was obvious with my cartoons that I was just showing tonight, we're not necessarily always going for a joke. A lot of cartoons are sort of on serious matters that you don't want to trivialize with an easy joke, or something that's a facile analogy or something. And so those are sort of more serious. And other times you try to bring some levity to a topic if that's appropriate.
I can certainly attest. I often look at your carousel of cartoons, and they are very enlightening. We have a question here about, you mentioned Maurice Sendak, and you showed us some slides that obviously were influenced by Sendak, and there were other people. You had this Bosch drawing. You talked about the Flintstones. You talked about Escher. How do you go to do you just read widely and these things pop into your head? What are the influences and how do they get into your brain?
I've been doing it for 40 years. So now I sort of have a little cartoon muscle in my brain that works at all times. On a really good day, I'll literally dream up a cartoon and wake up in the morning and kind of go, oh yeah, it's the Little Shop of Horrors or something. And my subconscious will come up with it. Other days I have to work a little bit harder at it. Part of my routine is I ride my bike to work, and I go down to, our offices are down in Roslyn. So it's like a 4-mile nice bike ride that gets my blood pumping. And usually a half-baked idea at the beginning of the bike ride will sort of get fully baked by the end of the bike ride. Although I just saw a documentary about Bill Malden, who was the famous cartoonist who drew Willie and Joe in World War II and went on to draw a bunch of other famous editorial cartoons. And his thing was, in the documentary, they showed this, his routine was he'd get up before the sun got up and draw a really hot bath and climb into a really hot bath, and sitting in the hot bath, the ideas would start to gel in the brain. So I may be trying that next when I start to run out of ideas.
Some of us used to say that our best ideas came in the shower, but you know, the hot bath is the same idea.
I've had that. No, there's something to that. There's something to hot water. I do think that either in shower form or in the bath form. Yeah.
We have another question. Is the sense of humor among the political cartoon viewers at risk of decline as education focuses more on skill sets and less on liberal arts and critical thinking? Okay.
It might be yes. The answer to that might be yes. I think that, I mean, to take that off to a slight tangent, there is this sort of new thing. There are heightened sensitivities. And this has been true the whole time I've been drawing, where if you go back to the 1960s and 70s, there were horrible racial stereotypes that everybody tolerated, you know, Latinos with mustaches and sombreros, and the history of political cartooning, if you go back even further, is just full of virulent racist imagery. So saying that's gradually improved. Even images of women in cartooning have gradually improved as we've tried to deal with racism and misogyny and all that kind of stuff. But these days, there's even sort of more heightened sensitivity, I think, to gay issues, the way you portray Native people. And in the olden days, when you were doing these cartoons, like for the first 20 years I did this, if somebody didn't like a cartoon, they had to go write a letter to the editor and invest whatever it was back then, 25 cents on a postage stamp, and send it to you. And these days, the comment section that usually is there in publications or on social media even faster, people can respond and attack you and sort of say that what you did, the way you portrayed that person was racist or sexist or something horrible. And you get these kind of pile-ons in social media where everybody sort of joins in. And that's a completely different landscape. You get instant feedback. You know when you've struck a nerve or maybe misstepped on something like that.
Do you read all of those comments?
It depends on my mood. I mean, if I'm feeling thick-skinned, sure, it's sort of always interesting, and sometimes I engage. Most of the time, I don't. It's part of the job now. So I did sort of step in it. I did a cartoon. This was when Hurricane Harvey, I think it was, hit Houston. I did a cartoon that it was a picture of the Texas secessionist headquarters, and the floodwaters had gone up to the eaves, and there was a guy wearing a "Don't Tread on Me" shirt and a cowboy hat, and he's being hoisted up into a helicopter, and he's exclaiming, "Angels from heaven, thank God Almighty," or something like that. And the guy in the helicopter is saying, "No, actually, the US Coast Guard sent by the federal government," which is a cartoon that there are variations on that thing that other people have done. But I did it maybe 3 days after the hurricane had hit.
Oh.
And people were still being rescued. And somebody, it was actually a writer at the Washington Post, sort of called me out on it and said, "This is really insensitive." And then the right-wing media sort of piled on, and suddenly I had Mike Huckabee and Karl Rove on Fox News talking about horrible elitists like Matt Wuerker that live in their penthouses and look down at people drowning and make fun of them and stuff like that. And fortunately, my editors at Politico were rock solid on it. And Robert Albritton, who owned Politico at the time, who's actually from Houston, you know, he sort of winced and looked at me and sort of said, "Maybe too soon." So there's a million different ways you can misstep and upset people. And the outrage triggers these days they're all in a hair trigger.
Yeah, that's for sure. Do you research before drawing a new idea to check to see whether somebody else has just done it, or how do you deal with that?
Well, that one's a hard one, and that happens in our business. We call those Yahtzees, where suddenly there'll be some low-hanging fruit where everybody kind of goes with the same metaphor, and you know, if once you've been in the business a while, you realize that that's sort of inevitable. And sometimes people sort of say, I got there first and you copied me. But I'm trying to think of a good example of a good Yahtzee. The classic one, which is an overused trope, was the Lincoln crying in the Lincoln Monument when some horrible tragedy happens to the country. Lincoln crying, or the Statue of Liberty crying, or whatever. And people will resort to that because it's very hard to do funny cartoons about tragedies. So, but no, otherwise it's sort of, I mean, my problem is that if anything, I worry about self-plagiarizing, in that I'll have an idea and I'll go, wait, did I do this for Bill Clinton or whatever? And then I don't know if it's not kosher to sort of recycle the magician Bill Clinton sort of idea for Joe Biden, but it's been 30 years maybe. Look at the New Yorker. How many times have cartoonists used the little palm tree on the island, right?
Matt, I'm afraid that we've run out of time, and but we appreciate it so much. This has been a delight, and we were looking forward to it, and we have not been disappointed. So I thank you. I know the audience thanks you, and I have to turn it back to Linda now.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you so much, Pat, and thank you, Matt, for that very entertaining presentation. We wish you good luck in dealing with your syndrome. And thank you for sharing those wonderful cartoons. It's obvious why you won the Pulitzer. And take care of that jackalope.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we always thank the audience for joining us. And on November 15th, we hope you will meet with us at the Cleveland Park Library. Finally, after 2 years or more, we are back in person on November 15th, when renowned journalists Peter Baker and Susan Glasser will join us. They'll discuss their latest book, The Divider, Trump in the White House, 2017 to 2021. Their books will be for sale before and after the talk, and Peter and Susan will sign books after the talk. So just in time for holiday shopping. In the meantime, thank you all. Good night and be well.
Thanks, Linda.